Hey guys, this is Mr. Grice for Algebra 2, Chapter 9.3, Linear Programming, Day 1. Our learning target today is to be able to use linear programming to solve real-world problems that require maximizing a profit. Let's get started with vocabulary. Now, linear programming is a method used by businesses and the government to manage resources and time. It was developed in response to military supply problems during World War II. Constraints are conditions that limit available resources, written as inequalities, and the objective quantity is an equation based on the profits. So pretty much where this came from is back in World War II when they were trying to maximize different equipment and stuff like that. One of the guys created linear programming to do this. Now, a lot of computers will actually do this for us now, but where the money is if you can actually do this by hand and you can create programs like that. So all we're going to be talking about today is real-world examples of linear programming. So what I want you to do, pause the video, read example number 1, and see if you can circle, highlight any information that you think is important. Okay? Go ahead and get started. So after marking up, that's all the stuff that I thought was important. Okay, now we're talking about two different types of bats. We're talking about the homer hitter and the big timbers bat. Okay, now the different things we're talking about is the trim of the bats, how long it takes to finish, and then how much each one of them costs. Okay, now the first thing we do after we read and write everything down, what we need to do is to start determining what the variables are. Okay, now down here at the bottom it says determine what your variables are based on the question. Well, what's the question? The question is right here. How many of each type of batch should the company produce in order to make them maximize their profits? Okay, so the two type of bats. And the way we always do it, whatever bat comes first, that's going to be what our X is. So X is the homer hitter, and then Y is going to be the big timber. So those are our two types of bats. Now, write the objective quantity, and it's going to be an equation based on the profit. So we have to go back and try to find, well, where are they talking about profit? Okay, and that's right here when they're talking a profit of 29 and a profit of 17. So the profit equals 17x plus 29y. Okay, because depending on how many of those bats they sell, that's how much money they make. Now, the next thing it's asking us to do is write a system of inequalities, and that represent the constraints based on the information in the problem. So, looking at the problem, there are two things that they keep talking about, okay? One thing is they keep talking about the trim, and the other thing they talk about is the finish. And these are going to be our restraints, okay? So, when we're talking about the trim, let's go up to that sentence. The trim is all the way up here. So it takes 8 hours to trim the homer hitter. So 8x plus 5 hours for the big timber. But now, what do we use for trimming? So you got to sift through and look to see where else it talks about trimming is right there for the 50 hours for the trimming. Okay, so we have to go through and look through this stuff. Okay, so we have a constraint of 80 hours. Now, can we go more than 80 hours? No, you can't, so it's got to be less than, okay? Less than or equal to that sort of number. Okay, now let's look at the other equation, or the other inequality. The other one's talking about the finish. Now, when they're talking about the finish, it takes two hours to finish a homer hitter and 5 hours to finish the big timber, and that has to be less than or equal to 50 hours, okay? So we're getting all of that information straight from the equation. Okay, so we have to take that information and we're actually going to create a graph about that. Now, oh my gosh. Oh, sorry about that. I'm sneezing all the time over here. So, given these constraints, we're going to draw a graph. Okay? Now, there are actually two other constraints that are in here, but these ones are actually given to us. Okay? X has to be greater than or equal to 0, or Y has to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay? We're only talking about, if you look at our quadrants right here, technically these quadrants go on like this, okay? We're only working in quadrant 1. Do you guys remember all the different quadrants? Now, the reason that is we want to talk about profits. The only time you're going to have profits are in that first quadrant, okay? So that's why this information right over here, the given, it's given to us already. Now, for us to graph this, we have to go through and we have to solve for y for each of those, because they have to be in y equals mx plus b if we're going to graph that, okay? So, subtract the x to both sides. You get 5y is less than or equal to negative 8x plus 80. And now, divide by 5. And here's the good news, guys. Since we're going to be working with some bigger numbers, you guys are actually able to use a calculator. Woohoo! All right. So, but when you're using a calculator, just remember that we always want a fraction as our slope. Okay? So, we have to start at 16. Now, if this is 5, there's 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're counting by each one of those is 1. Okay? So, there's 16. I need to go down 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Over 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And over 5. So there's your line. Okay? And it's less than, which means we have to shade everything below. Remember, you guys are using a pencil on this so you can make some erases later. All right? Now we have to solve for the other equation. Subtract the 2x. Divide everything by 5. And you get y is less than or equal to negative 2/5 x plus 10. So starting at positive 10, and then you go down 2 over 5, down 2 over 5. Okay, and there's your line, and go ahead and graph that as well. Just like the other one, that's less than, so I'm going to shade everything that is less than that line. And the cool thing starts to happen is everything in the green is what you should actually shade in, okay? So this part right here is my actual answer, okay? And then you should be erasing all that other stuff, okay? Boom, boom, it's gone. So, any questions so far? Well, I don't know if you've got any because I can't hear you, okay? Now, one of the things that you need to pay attention to is when we're doing these writing our inequalities is you need to pay attention to the limits, okay? The limits, those are going to tell you how to set up your inequality, okay? Because if you look back up to the top, it says right here, where was it? The company has a limited time of 80 hours for the trimming. That's where that 80 hours came from, okay? We're getting everything directly from the paragraph, okay? So, now that we've got this stuff, we need to find the vertices, okay? Now, looking at that shape, what shape is that? Well, how many sides does it have? It has 4 sides, which means it's a quadrilateral. Okay, 4 sides. How many corners does it have? Well, Mr. Grice, it's got 4 corners, okay? And those corners are called vertices, okay? Now, let's take a look at the 4 corners. There's one right there. There's one right there. There's one right there. And there's one right there. But why do I only have a spot for 3? We're talking about profits, right? Why would we want 0, 0 as a profit? That means you're not making anything, okay? So that's why 0 is kind of thrown out. So our first one right here, that's at the number 0, 10. Our second number is at the number 5, 8. And then our last number is 10, 0. Okay? Now, here's the last step. Those are the different numbers that we're going to be plugging in back into to find out what the profit was. Okay? So the 17x plus the 29y equation, we're going to go back and plug these numbers in to see which one of these gives us the most profit, because that's what they're trying to find. So is it 17 times 0 plus 29 times 10? Because that's our first point. $290. Okay, our second one, and then the third one. So you should be plugging in 5 and 8, and then 10 and 0. Oh, well, this one's real easy. Okay, so now in your calculators, you should be plugging this in and be like, well, 17 times 5, oh, that's 85. Plus, let's see, 29 times 8, ooh, that's 232. Add those numbers up, and you get 317. So the combination of which bats that they should make is the 5 and the 8. So how many of each batch should they make? Well, they remember what your X is. Your X is the homer hitters, and 8 of the big timbers. Okay? So, as we're going through this again, the first thing we did was we kind of read everything. Then we determined what our variables were based on that question. Remember, the question was the thing all the way at the very end. We did our objective quantity. That's when we're looking at the profits right here of each one. Then we started looking on the constraints, trying to figure out what our inequalities were, graphed them, looked at the points, and then plugged them back in. Okay? Now, what you guys are going to do real quick, this right here, this is your homework. Okay? But I'm actually going to do some of this with you. So, what I want you to do is to pause the video, go ahead and look at the information in here, and see if you can figure out A and B. Okay? C, you're going to have to figure out all by yourself. Well, maybe I'll be nice. Maybe I'll put C in there too. But go ahead and pause the video. Try to do A, B, and C. And then when you start it back up, you'll start seeing some answers. Okay? Good luck. Okay, so there's all the stuff that I highlighted. Now, when we're setting up our variables, remember, we look at the last part right here. How many of each type of vehicle should be manufactured? Okay? Well, they're talking about cars and trucks. Now, the objective quantity based on the profit, so the profit equals, right there, it says 500 per car and 500 or 700 per truck. Did you guys get that? All right. Now, the last part is you're looking at the limits, okay? So we're talking about the first shop has a limit of 200 workers. And now the second shop has a limit of 150. Okay? So the constraints that we're going to be talking about, we already know the given, that x is greater than or equal to 0 and y is greater than or equal to 0. You don't have to worry about those ones. But your constraints, you're going to be talking about the first shop and the second shop. See if you guys can use the information to write those inequalities. Okay? Pause the video, and then when you start it back up, I'll show you what they are. Okay, so you got 1x plus 4y is less than or equal to 200 because the first shop, right here, the first shop needs 1 worker per day and 4 workers per truck. And the second shop, 3 workers and 2 workers. Okay, and then the limitations were there. All right, so what you have to do now is you're going to have to solve for y and graph and figure out the rest. And the rest of this is going to be your homework, okay? Now, if you have any questions, please come see Ms. Carranza or myself because we would love to help you out. Otherwise, that's it for Algebra 2, Chapter 9.3, Linear Programming, Part 1. Thanks for watching.